Hey, and welcome to another episode of Art Source. Today we're going to be focusing on a feature product, which is the Golden Crackle Paste. And we're going to be just showing how to apply it to be able to do some wondrous effects like these little bad boys. These are little abstract artworks that act as a magnet, right? And they are done on the Ampersand Gessobord. But I'm going to be showing you some other substrates that you can actually apply the crackle paste to just to get these awesome effects. But these little abstract guys, we're actually going to be doing a hands-on demo featuring the Ampersand boards and the Golden Crackle Paste along with some other media at Kudzu Art Zone in January. And here's another guy that's got a little bit of pearlescent effect, so you can see, ooh, the little iridescent silver patches on there. So you can really go a variety of ways with this. So anyway, let's get started. What we're going to be focusing on first is the variety of substrates that you can work on. So there's a artist panel, which is the student series of the Ampersand board. And so these guys are a little bit more economical, and the materials that go into them are a little bit easier for practice and student grade. And sometimes you can find some great sales at your local art store on these. Then there's also the Gessobord, which the Gessobord, these are just flat panels that actually don't have any cradling to them. And the Gessobord has been coated with a smooth layer of gesso ahead of time. And some of them are textured and some of them are smooth primed. So you can get a variety where one actually has the canvas print texture on it, and that's what we're going to be working on today. And then also you can get the Ampersand hardboard, which is just the plain material that's uncoated, and you can just go direct with any surface. And this would be helpful if you wanted to have a colored background adhered to it before you even begin with the golden paste. Now, for the purpose of this video, I am prepping a demo for an upcoming class, which you can find on the website, www.micahgoguen.com. And then also you can follow us on Facebook at Micah Goguen Art or Instagram at Micah Goguen Art. But what we're going to be using is we're going to be using a Ampersand student. It is the canvas texture Gessobord. So this, you can see, has an actual texture to it already. It's just like a brief canvas imprint. And what I've used on the side is actually what's called frog tape. And let me grab that real quick so I can show you the packaging. The frog tape is a adhering tape that works a little bit differently than the traditional painter's tape. It actually has a aqua seal when activated with water that will seal the edges. Now, why am I doing that? Do I need to do it with crackle paste? No, you don't. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stain them with a fluid media in another video to get this effect. And so because the fluid media will be dripping down the side, I want to seal this to protect, because Ampersand puts a high quality furniture grade cradling on all their boards because it's meant to be exposed and the beauty of the wood. So I don't really want to paint over that. I want to let that beauty shine through. So I put the painter's tape all around to protect the edges, and then you take a moist cloth and dampen the tape, and it actually forms an adherent seal that keeps the wood protected, but it still peels off just like traditional painter's tape. So I've already gessoed this black. And so what we talked about was the fact that you could leave it blank or not. So if I was working on the hardboard, for example, and wanted to put a coat of black gesso on, then, you know, perhaps it wouldn't be necessary to buy the Gessobord if you know you're already going to gesso over it. Now, in this case, I started with something exactly like this, but as you can see, it's cradled. And when I mean cradled, it's going to be that there is a thickness. You can see the recession here so that you can create wiring inside the panel. It does not need to be framed. It's a standalone piece, although it can be framed. There are some floating frames available through Ampersand that you can also frame your work. But I'm choosing not to on this piece, and I just wanted the cradling. And there's different thicknesses of cradling. You can get different measurements depending on how thick, and this is one of the thicker versions here. And let's see. I actually have some of the crackle paste here that we're going to go ahead and apply. And I've got a palette knife used to apply that. And so I've just got a standard metal palette knife. And then I've got just a regular 8 fluid ounce jar of Crackle paste. Now you can get a large version of the Crackle paste if you need something a little bit bigger to apply, and you can certainly go there with that. And I'm going to take the panel here, and I'm taking the Crackle paste. You can see the creamy texture of it. It's almost like a marshmallow cream, And the cool thing about the Crackle paste is that it is a opaque material, which means that it's not going to allow you to see through to the paint layers below. It's going to create a full opaque finish. And then it's also a matte finish, and it's got an absorbent property. So that's what's allowing the inks to just filter right in and absorb into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a pretty generous fluff of this, and I'm just going to dip in. You can see how creamy and workable it is. It's very easy to manipulate. And I'm just going to take a generous heaping spread, and just like I'm slathering some peanut butter on a piece of bread, I'm just going to smear it out onto the panel. Now, how thick should this be, you might be asking? So depending on the environmental elements around, so how much moisture is in the air, and whether it's a rainy day, and what's going on with your temperature in your studio, you're going to apply different thicknesses. Also to consider how thick you want the cracks to be. So you can get something a little bit generous like this, and you can see the actual thickness that was applied. It's colored, so you can see the layers and how thick it became in some areas. It gives you an idea of the thickness that was applied there. Let's see if we can see a generous, look at how thick some of that was on there. See? So that gives you the idea. So this is more of the thickness of like a nickel per se, and then it kind of scoots down to the thinness of a dime. And you can see that as it got thinner, the cracks got smaller. Look at how small the cracks are here because of the thinness on it. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of the layers of thickness, I hope. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of smear until I get a generous heaping helping over the entire surface here. So we're going to be taking just a little bit more of the spread. I'm not scared to use it, and I'm just going to be applying it all over. I'm not worried about palette knives or strokes or anything like that. Right now I'm just trying to get the material completely covered. And it's got a pretty easy open time, meaning that it's going to stay workable for a certain period of time. So I'm just going to work that on there. I'm not worried about the edges because I put the tape down to help with that. So I'm really just going to spread out. Let me grab another heaping load. And it's really easy just to, carve that out of there. I guess the only thing really going through my mind right now is like, maybe I don't want to put too much on there, but right now I'm not concerned with too much because I haven't even covered the black. So I'm just trying to do a general mass in or block in before I even worry about if I have too much. And I'll show you how you can skim off the top like we just did to borrow working your palette knife. Now once I get everything covered, you see how I'm scraping off? I'm taking like an extra, and then I'm just using this to scrape off on the edge so that I can get some large piles there, and then I can just move it around. Okay, so now that everything's covered, I'm looking at the texture on there. Now if these ripples stay there, they will also stay even when it cracks. But also I can kind of look at the thickness of the material and see if I want to go thicker with it or thinner. Now in this case in particular, I do want, for the workshop that I'm leading, I want it to be a little bit on the thinner level so that I can see. And let's try and put this gray so that you can really get a sense of the thickness. You see how there's peaks and valleys within it, so some areas are thicker. So now I'm wanting to just create a smoother surface. So what I'm going to do is just take the palette knife now that I've got everything down, and I'm just going to work in a horizontal fashion here just to smooth out any of that. I'm going to flip it around. And I do want some raising, but overall I'm going to scrape that and flip it down again just to create the smooth. The more of the material that's on the back of the palette knife, then the more the surface is going to get some texture added to it. So I'm just trying to focus here, being able to smooth that bad boy out. And see how I just keep wiping it, and then we'll just smooth out the very end there. Okay, so now I've got a pretty good surface. It does have some lines in it. I could continue to manipulate those down, and I'm going to go ahead and let some of it stay in there for layered interest. I don't want it to be totally smooth so that I can have some added interest with the cracks in there. I just want to get my big recessions and peaks out. Okay, so then we're going to let that dry, and once it dries we will have the amazing crackle texture. This is really easy to clean up, and you can just simply take a palette knife and just make sure that you take your palette knife and just wipe off while it's still in wet application, and then just rinse your palette knife off and you'll be good to go. And we're going to make sure also, a little safety tip, and just to help keep your product fresh, is while you're spreading, make sure that you keep your lids on so that the material doesn't dry out. You know, just 15-20 minutes of it being open won't dry it out completely, but you know, especially as you get toward the bottom of the container, you're going to want to preserve what's left, and the more air it hits, the more it's going to affect the consistency of the material. So again, we're going to be creating these magnets on the Crackle paste, and it's very exciting. And I just adhered 2 magnets on the back of these little Gessobord samples so that it can be your own little mini abstract art on your refrigerator. So I hope that you will join us for the next video where we actually take the Crackle paste after it's dried, and we'll be adhering the fluid media to it so that we can enjoy our magnets together. And if you happen to be in the Atlanta area, join us at Kudzu in January and come make your own free make and take magnets so that you can have your own artwork at home. Again, you can find workshops and classes on the website, Facebook, or Instagram. And one final note on the dry time here for the Crackle paste is I want to set it somewhere with open ventilation. It's not a highly sensitive product as far as smell goes, but you know, just depending on what your senses are like, you may want to keep it in an open ventilated area. Also, generally I wait about 24 hours for the cracks, but again, it depends on the thickness of the material, and again how the conditions are, the weather conditions are in your area, on how long the cracking will take to affect. But please join us again for another episode of Art Source, and we'll continue working with more products. And I appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you again.